Can I first of all thank Murdo Fraser for his very kind comments and welcome me to my new place. I'm very happy to be keeping the seat warm for him for next year when he moves over to this side of the chamber. Or sooner. There's a chair next to me right here, Mr Fraser. What I would like to say, though, is that I'm delighted to be making what presumably would be classed as a maiden speech in that sense from the Liberal Democrat benches, because the economy underpins everything when it comes to government. And absolutely the view from this side of the chamber is quite different, but some things haven't changed. Presumably that includes the challenges facing Scotland's economy, but also, as my amendment today states, the Scottish Government's lack of industrial strategy, and I hope that's something we will find some agreement on across the floor. But of course, that's nothing new, of course. The Auditor-General last year was quite firm on this issue by stating that the Scottish Government's 10-year economic strategy lacks collective political leadership and clear targets. It was also warned as far back as 2021 by the Fraser-Vallender Institute when they said that without a coordinated strategy, interventions risk being tactical fixes rather than strategic investments that build long-term economic growth. It was also warned by this Parliament's Economy and Fair Work Committee in 2022, when they said that the absence of a clear industrial strategy has contributed to reactive, piecemeal interventions that lack coherence and long-term vision. That's pretty damning, Cabinet Secretary. Audit Scotland in 2023 repeated the same warning, that there was a continuing need for the Government to ensure robust planning, value for money assessments and, of course, exit strategies when considering financial interventions in private companies. And the Public Audit Committee, which I sit on, and I'm happy to still be sitting on, made also clear that taxpayers must be confident that government investments are made with a clear purpose, sound financial judgment and a credible plan to exit at the right time. The problem is that none of these warnings have been heeded, which is why, well, they haven't, Cabinet Secretary, which is why the coal industry, the shipbuilding industry and the steel industry, which used to employ over 400,000 Scots, now just under 50,000. But the Scottish Government today, in its motion, rightfully asks the question, if the UK Government can intervene in Scunthorpe, then why not in Grangemouth? And that's a fair question, but it entirely misses the point here, because Grangemouth has been around for over 100 years. It is the oldest oil refinery in the UK. But across decades, very little has been done to help the site move in that transition away from fossil fuels. We've known for years, of course, that we need to tackle climate change. We've known for years that there would be a shift away from oil and gas. And yes, it may have been in private ownership, but that does not mean that government or governments have absence of responsibility. The question is, instead, will public ownership solely fill in the financial gaps that exist, or will it lead that industry to a glorious new future? Now, I know why governments intervene. It's to stop the immediacy of job losses. I get that. But the Scottish Government has spent £500 million on financial interventions in private companies in recent years. And where has that led them to? Let's look at some of them. Prestwick Airport, £55 million of public money. BIFAB, £50 million. Oh, don't worry, I'm coming on to that, Cabinet Secretary. BIFAB, £50 million of public money. Ferguson Marine, £300 to £500 million of public money. And of course, the GFG Alliance, albeit on different terms, did expose the taxpayer to potential risk of another £500 million. And that's the point of my amendment. I'll make some progress, then I will. Chucking money into private companies, yes, it will save jobs in the short term, but it is a entirely reactive approach to intervening in business. Now, call me a cynic, but the photo opportunities for ministers to stand outside the gates of some of those companies have been far more successful than the turnaround activity in the businesses themselves. That, presumably, is why CBI Scotland is now calling on the Scottish Government to remove barriers to economic growth, tackling the skills shortages, creating a competitive business environment. Those are fair asks. Now, I understand why the UK Government stepped in on British Steel. It was a critical situation. And Scunthorpe and Grangemouth highlight the importance of domestic ownership in our energy sector rather than being controlled by foreign powers. We all know where that leads to, but bailouts alone are not the answer nor the solution. This reactive firefighting approach to the Scottish economy is not and should not replace a long-term industrial strategy. Businesses are adept at changing in tough circumstances. It's what business does best. It's what the private sector has been doing for years. But when it cannot survive, The government, if it chooses to intervene with public money, must use exceptional due diligence during and after those interventions, because lessons are not being learned. I've seen it firsthand on the West Coast. Let's look at Prestwick Airport. 2013, it was bought by the Scottish Government, and it is still in public ownership with no vision in sight to return it to the private sector. The same be true of Ferguson Marine back in 2019. And how is that going? The yard is losing out on much-needed contracts for new ships, and the private sector is going to Liverpool. Look, I have no problem with any government intervening in private business with the purpose of saving jobs and preventing the collapse of industries. We all want to see good people and good jobs. But when the government does use public money to do so, it needs to demonstrate prudence and honesty with the taxpayer. It needs to be honest about the risks involved and the robustness of its exit strategy, if there is one. And that is the point of my amendment today, and I urge the Chamber to support it. I move the amendment in my name.